Hi everyone, we are here today joined by Sam and Khareem. Thanks for tuning in and watching this. Obviously, with everything that's been happening recently, we thought it would be a great idea to bring this sort of special, I guess, socially distanced podcast once again to you guys and just provide some different perspectives, some context, some history, some personal experiences on particularly what's happened with George Floyd, but also what that whole movement, I guess, is about and the history behind all of that stuff. I guess, obviously, recently it seems that things have escalated quite strongly. People put up posts and there's a lot of kind of fuss, and rightly so, about it on social media and online and on the news and on the media. But this is something that's been going on for a while deep down. So we want to dig into some of the history and some of the lessons that we can learn. We really believe, I think all three of us, that we should learn from history so that, one, we don't repeat the same mistakes again, and two, so that we're able to represent the history of all the human race in a fair and right way throughout the education system and just for us personally. So why don't you guys just tell us a little bit about yourselves? Maybe Khareem, if you go first.
Oh well, this is the part I hate the most, talking about myself. So, so yeah, I'm a historian, writer, musician, like you, Mark, dabbling in about a million things, right? At the same time.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
But no, history. I think history is great because history is the story of everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then, if you can't learn from history, what is there to learn from? So, in fact, I don't understand why history isn't given more importance, in terms as a sort of as a subject to learn in school. It's sort of one of those subjects people add on, isn't it? It doesn't seem to be the main subject people, unless you're real passionately about it. But it's so important because obviously that leads us to today. What's the path that's led us to where we are today in all aspects of our life? It's history. So it's important that we know that.
And Sam, just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Okay, my name's Samuel. What do I do? I work in finance, but when it comes to matters of the social ilk, I'm quite active and interested. I participate a lot in my local community and church, and yeah, I love engaging in these matters. So yeah, this is a passion of mine, to be fair. So yeah, I'm not as qualified as Khareem, but I do love having a matter and engaging on social issues. And when it comes to social issues, is something that I'm quite heavily involved in, especially Black issues.
You know what's up.
So obviously, like I sort of said at the start, obviously everything's kind of kicked up recently with the death of George Floyd and the non-prosecution of those three officers that were involved, and again the third degree murder charge for the first officer there. Have either of you got any opinions on why things have come to a head so much recently with this? Because obviously George is unfortunately another name in a long list of people that go back nearly 400 or 500 years now, of people who've suffered at the hands of this kind of regime. Why are we in this place again now? And obviously we talk about it hitting America predominantly, but this is a worldwide issue. What are perhaps some of the things that you think have kind of led to this unique situation kind of happening now, where everybody's kind of unified against this systemic racism?
I guess you could really ask that question, Mark, whenever it happened. Is that we don't really know. It's just that at some point it was going to happen because it has to. If you know what I mean. So I don't think anyone can pinpoint any one thing. I would say one thing though: the nature of the offense, the nature of the killing was particularly horrific. And in fact, the guy was so. Anyone notice he had his hand in his pocket when he was kneeling on the guy's neck? was in a very nonchalant fashion, as if, well, it's so matter of fact, it's nothing, That's one thing that struck me when I saw him, just, lean on this guy's neck. It's one thing to kill a guy with a gun from a distance.
Mm.
But this man was connected to the victim's body physically. So the vibrations of somebody, appealing for mercy or saying, I can't breathe, should be able to reach him, even if not vocally or audibly, but physically, if you know what I mean. To be in touch with somebody and they, you're virtually depriving them of life and they're begging for mercy, but not to respond to that is pretty horrific. So I don't know what kind of a state of mind or heart that man had, but he was just looking for an opportunity perhaps to do that. Maybe it could have been any time.
I think what made this this situation more potent than the lot. Well, let's be honest. Each one adds to the next one, but the difference with this particular one, is, in comparison to the others, is there was no running, there was no arguments. It was a person on the floor. And this recording, you saw the process of him being held, him asking or stating he couldn't breathe, to life leaving his body. It was a sequence over 9 minutes that people saw a person transition from present tense to past tense. And I think that really hit the conscience of everyone. Because I think the last time, when you think of like Eric Gardner and a few of the others, every previous time is, that's the last time, this will not happen again. And we'll have a march and then they'll say, okay, it's not going to happen again, and it happens again. And then you're like, no, it's definitely not going to happen again. And it happens again. And then this time, the fact that the humanity of this person was clearly on display. He was helpless. He got to a point where he cried out for his mother. And what makes that so emotionally powerful is that his mum's dead. And everyone knows what he was really crying out for. It was the cry of a child looking for help. And as a child runs to the mum signifies comfort, protection, support. And he was at that point where he couldn't help himself. And the way that the officer dealt with him, and it wasn't just one, it was a team of officers, but the particular one that was on his neck, it was the lack of care for another human being. And I think on all levels, us as humans, regardless of race, we were all affected. And I think that is clear to see in the global reaction. I don't think that there is a section of this planet where there is a community that is not looking at that and saying, do you know what, that's wrong. You know, this is something that we need to talk about. And I think because of that, as humans, we were all touched. And I think that the potency of it has transcended all cultures. I think the power in the pain of it will come out in the Black community because of the historical association of that treatment. But as a moment in history, I think that this is going to be a watershed moment that I think the shockwaves are going to go up and down the system. That's a personal view, just from the steps that I'm seeing being taken. I think social media has had a massive impact, but even outside of that, the steps that are being taken in the United States as far as being organized, getting a legal team together and trying to attack the issue from the position of policy and law and legislation, it's going to have a massive impact. And I think because there's a global consensus that this is wrong, and there must be forces behind it that's contributing to the regularity of these types of situations. I think because that's uniformly accepted, I think the approach is going to be very different. I don't think it's going to be, well, he should have just listened, or he should have just cooperated, which in the past has been the mitigating circumstance that has stopped everyone from taking it as seriously as we possibly should have previously. I think now there are absolutely no excuses that can justify the treatment that this person had. And I think it's got to a point where people are saying, if I'm honest, it's so clear as day. You're either on this side where you're saying it's wrong, or whether you're silent or you're actually saying it, you're contributing to the side that's saying it's right. I think the line is so clear on this one. And I think that's what's made it such a powerful event.
You talked about law, Sam. You mentioned the law in your preamble there. And the only thing is that law doesn't change people's hearts.
Yeah.
You see.
Yeah.
It just prevents you from expressing what you really want to say or feel. Yeah. And that's the thing with about law. Laws are great. You do need them as a backative, to, as a preventative measure. But what you want to change is people's hearts, really, and minds, Yeah. And that is what they have not attacked the systematic racism from that angle, which is an educational thing from day one. I mean, no one is born racist.
Yeah.
I mean, racism is an invention of the 18th century. That's how late it's come into our existence. It's Johannes Blumenbach we have to thank for that. With a very unscientific process, which he created all these races. But before that, you would not have heard about races. In history, people didn't make war on somebody else because of their color. They made war on you because you got something I want. Gold or whatever it is, minerals, resources, people, whatever. That's the premise of war or land, but not because of race and that kind of thing. So it's hearts and minds we want to change, and the law is the last resort.
What have your views been so far on the way that, just moving back a moment to George Floyd, particularly on the way that the media, I'm sure you've seen loads of videos and articles and things like that by now, on the way that the media has covered it. Do you think that they've helped push the cause forwards in terms of trying to remember what this is actually all about? Or do you think they've detracted from what it's about by focusing on riots and looting and some of the negative connotations behind why these things are happening?
I think the media is a tool. And I think that people that are involved understand that the media is a tool. And depending on where you sit, that tool can be used to benefit your cause. And I think initially when it came out, when there were protests, it was about the humanity of the situation. And I think as time's gone on, intelligent people who want to derail a cause will speak out or allow things to be focused. I think the media is always going to be the media. I don't think that we can ever be surprised when the focus that the media tries to bring to a situation will vary from one to the next. It's a business, they're trying to sell papers, they're trying to encourage as many ears as possible to focus on them speaking or buy their products. I think recently there's been a distraction from the cause to the riots or the looting and all of that. But from a personal position, I think on these types of issues, that is a standard. It's a standard response as far as when it comes to the media, not looting, where the media will look for a distraction or an alternative focus to take away from the direction of the cause. I think that the whole situation with the looting, even when maybe it's because I've seen certain videos, I'm very suspicious of the drivers as to how that started and all of the rest of it. When you see random people just smashing windows or a pile of bricks that have just conveniently been laid by a building filled with glass, I think that there are things that I'm open to accepting. I don't understand what's going on in the unseen. For the media, I think that the beautiful thing about social media is that we don't live in a time now where we need to necessarily rely on mainstream media for us to understand what's going on and to build or form our views of the world that we live in and the events that are going on. So when I see reporting on certain on the situation, I normally look at it, and if I'm perfectly honest, from a personal, this is just a personal position, I don't really take on board the direction that the media try to portray with the situation. And when I look at the papers and the news stations, I understand that I live in a world in which there is a social agenda on issues of race, and the agenda struggles to focus on the hardships created by these types of events, and will try to give what they say is a balanced perspective, but really it's agenda based. I don't put it in a box of whether it's fair or unfair. I just accept that's the way that things are in this system. And these things will always happen in these types of situations.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because to put it in kind of blunt terms, you know, like racism and the mistreatment of black people is kind of old news. And I guess it doesn't, you know, it's not going to sell papers, is it really? And if you can get a rise out of people, you know, if you can record people walking into Nike stores and pinching trainers and setting things on fire and graffitiing cop cars and things like that, that's like, you know, it's reality TV all over again, isn't it? Exactly. People love that. Example. You know, it's Jerry Springer and Oprah Winfrey and like, you know, like, it's, people love that sensationalism, don't they? And it drives this kind of visceral reaction, rightly or wrongly. But it's the question of, does it encourage change? Obviously, we've seen on social media, we've had Blackout Tuesday, we've had lots of posts being made about books that we can read and films that we can watch and ways that we can educate ourselves and get involved with petitions, and, you know, be interesting to find out what people are doing, because it's going to be the stuff, isn't it? And like you were saying, Khareem, in the hearts and minds of people, in a private space, when they're alone, you know, are they thinking about the way that they stereotype people, the way they talk about people, the opportunities they give their employees as an employer, are they fair? Are they actually equal? You know, those kind of things, and that kind of self-evaluation, that's going to be the most important part. We can only control what we do, right? So I guess there's a huge individual part to play for every one of us in this.
Absolutely. I think the problem with news is that it's if news was just for the sake of telling us what is going on, and there was no profit-making element to it, then it probably wouldn't be polluted. Yeah. But because it's sensationalized and it has to sell, what the objective is to sell, you know, to make a profit, then that comes in, well, you know, this is boring, like you said before about it's old news, isn't it, racism? So it doesn't have any sensational element to it, therefore people are not going to be interested in it. So that's where lies come in, and that's where, you know, the truth gets, you know, distorted and that type of thing, simply because they have to try to find an angle to try to sell the news, as it were. And all of these news channels are typically owned by, you know, one or two people, or three people, you know, which is a very dangerous thing. Again, that's another angle. You know, you can't have news which is polarized and owned, centralized by two or three groups or media groups. That's dangerous. That in itself is dangerous. You know? So yeah, everything I watch on news, I pass through a filter. I mean, you know, I'll watch it, but it has to be filtered, you know, because I'll question everything.
And I guess a lot of that, well, I'm guessing, but I don't know. You can tell me. That filter, I guess, comes from personal experience as well, doesn't it? You know, you put it through the filter of, okay, what I've actually seen with my own eyes, as opposed to, am I just going to accept what everybody tells me is true?
And I think it goes from an early age as well. My dad was always telling me that about Labour, Conservative, Liberal, whatever. He says, really, son, doesn't really matter, you know. You know. And from when you made that statement to me, I looked into it. And that was a very young age, so I had this inquisitive spirit anyway. So then that started me questioning everything, you know.
So to get right into it, then, you know, dig into a little bit of, if you don't mind, a little bit of your personal experiences. Maybe both of you tell me a little bit about, you know, the way you grew. I guess I sent a little bit out before we did this podcast, a little bit of information out or questions that we could talk about. And what I really want to get an understanding for perhaps some people who haven't had the upbringing that you two have had, and that many Black people have had, is what is it like to grow up and kind of realize that you're Black and be told, okay, you need to watch yourself around the cops, you know? Because again, for me, I've never had this. You know, when I first moved to Lewisham, I live with a Jamaican guy, and we used to travel a lot of the same roads. We both used to work. And the stories that he had versus the stories that I had were very different.
Very
And
different.
and I think it was the first time for me that I appreciated that there's something vastly different in our experiences purely because of our skin color, because we lived very similar lives. We used the same shops. We spoke to some of the same people. We both had jobs that we went to and came back in the evening. We cooked food. Our lives were shared in some ways. And so yeah, maybe if you don't mind, just share a little bit about that, because that's maybe an experience that a lot of white people will never quite understand, and I think that would be educational to know about.
Sam, you want to go first? Huh?
Okay, I don't mind. For anyone that's watching or listening to this podcast, I want that what you hear, don't be offended, scared, shocked, but it is, I think, important for us to cross these bridges of understanding, these gaps in our understanding, because we do have misconceptions of each other's lives, especially if we don't integrate different people from different cultures or different walks of life. We fail to get an insight. And really what we're sharing is just to give you an insight as to why the views that some Black people that you may hear, or some views that you may see online, are there. They're not there to just scream for the sake of screaming, or take advantage of a situation just to be a part of the bandwagon. These views, these emotions are deep rooted in personal experiences, being a part of a society that doesn't see you as a member of that society. So yes, we walk by each other and say hi and bye, or we may be at work and we may talk by the coffee machine and have these conversations. But when we leave those social environments and go about our lives, we end up interacting or having experiences in society that are vastly different.
Yeah.
I was born in the 80s. And grew up in the 80s, which was a very interesting time for the Black community, especially in South London. I'm a South Londoner. Hey. And I was raised by a very conscious family. I came from a family, my mum's side's Jamaican, my dad's side's from Barbados. And for those who are unfamiliar, Barbados was the first Barbados was the Caribbean island that they piloted slavery on, and every member, every descendant from Barbados, or every person from Barbados, is a descendant of a slave, because that was the first Caribbean island that they took out the experiment on. And my dad, my gran, and then my family from Jamaica, and my family from Jamaica, Jamaicans and Bajans normally have a little rivalry. But when I was growing up, because Barbados is a smaller island than Jamaica, and yeah, there's a bit of Caribbean rivalry there. But on both sides, I was brought up to have an awareness that I'm in a society in which I am not seen as an equal member in that society. I learnt this lesson as a child. My aunts and my uncles, especially on my mum's side, made me fully aware of who I am in society, so that I didn't leave the house expecting things to be a way that they eventually wouldn't be. So my dad's side of the family live there. He's from Barbados, but they live in the United States. I spent half of the year when I was growing up, or all summer holidays, half terms, full terms, we would fly out to the United States. I spent large volumes of time over there. And my aunts and uncles over there would repeat and reinforce what my uncles and aunts in London were telling me from my mum's side. So when I've never been in a phase of my life where I haven't known that I'm Black. I think that was embedded in me as a child. I think when it became, when it transitioned from advice and stories at home to a real life situation, I was about 7 years old at school. And there was a boy, his name's Adam. I'll never forget it, ginger guy. And I remember it clear as day. We're in the playground, we were playing football, tackled, he fell down, he got up and he used the N-word. And I knew no person's allowed to say that to you. And instantly my reaction, along with a few of my school friends, was no, you can't. And we ended up having a confrontation that wasn't physical, but it let him know you can't say that, you just can't use that language. And I grew up in a school where it was quite racially diverse, but very culturally ignorant. So in the early 90s, as a 10-year-old, again, you'd grow up and you'd see graffiti and you would see a lot of stuff that would let you know that you're seen differently. And the thing that I found quite interesting growing up, understanding that we're seen differently, was it wasn't just the layman in the street that was really confusing to me, because I think people on the street, and I learned this from a young age, can have their opinions. I think what really disturbed me, and I couldn't make sense of it, was that people in positions of influence and authority felt the same way. Because as a child, I was taught, you know what, if you got a problem, go to the teacher. So you're always taught that, you know what, people in authority are going to take care of you. You know what, don't fight in the playground. Go tell the teacher and the teacher will sort it out. Okay, if something happens, don't fight your brother. Tell your mum or dad will say, tell me and I'll deal with them. And as a child, you automatically assume that people in authority would be there to take care of issues that could happen between you and someone else. It was a big shock to me to learn about how I was seen by government figures and more on a day-to-day basis, the police. That was very, very shocking as a child, because I couldn't make sense of it, because you're in a position of authority, you should care. Why don't you care?
That's interesting. Sam, just go back a little bit. You were talking about, sorry to interrupt you, because I wanted to dig into, you were talking a bit before about, before you got to that age of 7 and you had that experience, the conversations you would have with your grand, the conversations you would have with your family, that let you knew that when you stepped out of that door, you were seen as different, right? What did, again, for the ignorant and for me and every other bit, what did that conversation look like? What sort of things would you be told?
Okay, you would be told, okay, listen, you're not seen as the same, yeah. So because you're not seen as the same, don't expect that you won't be able to get away with what those kids get away with. So if you're talking in class and they're talking in class, you're going to get pulled up for it. Like, if you do something, and if the two of you do the exact same thing, you're the one that's going to get in trouble. They'll get the conversation and be told, listen, don't do that again. You'll get sent out the class. When you're walking on the street.
And what was the reason you were given? I'm sure at some point you wondered why. How did your parents or your grandparents not justify that, but how did they explain that to you?
They said that we were brought up with the term the system, yeah? And if you ask a black person what that means, yeah, it is a single statement that quantifies everything that you will engage when you leave your house. Because the system impacts the law, it impacts the policing, it impacts the schools, it impacts the education curriculum, it impacts jobs, it impacts every aspect of our life when we leave the house. And the system is designed to marginalize you in a way. So when you go to school and they kick you out, it's because the system facilitates that. The system doesn't say that it has to be equal or this is a code of conduct. It will be clearly these guys are like this. So therefore, before you even told us anything, we understand that you had to deal with them like that. And that is the pre-statement to every situation that involved a black child, and we see that in the perceptions that people have before they've heard the details of a situation. A person could come with a stereotypical narrative, and that is just enough for them to accept the information that they're given. So an example, a black boy in a hood, he was arrested because we thought he had drugs on him. We don't need details of that. He fits the stereotypical idea. Because he fits that, he's more than likely going to be that thing. I don't need anything more than that. And for us, that line of thinking was created by what we would deem to be the system and its agenda to not include you, to not provide any space for you in society. So whether it's you're walking down the street and a policeman will see you in an area that he feels you shouldn't be in and question you or harass you. I had a situation when I was 17, and myself and my friends were going to look at prospective universities, and my parents travelled abroad because my dad's a minister, and he speaks at churches all over the world, and my mum accompanies him. And I was 17, my sister was 19, and my youngest brother was about 15 or 14. So we legally took care of ourselves, and there was a person from the church who stayed with us. So whilst my parents were away, my dad gave me his bank card to pay any, like if there was anything that we needed, any food, shopping or anything, because I was quite responsible. He allowed me to manage the finances whilst they were away for a couple of weeks. And as a 17-year-old at this time, this was the time when getting into the cinema to watch movies, you needed ID if you were under 18. So what I'd done is I used to buy a travel card because I was going to college in Hammersmith and I was commuting from South London. So I had my student travel card, 16 to 17, with my correct surname on it. And I got a adult photo card and I put the name Smith on it so that I could use that as ID to get into cinemas. And that was the only purpose that I had the photo card. The only thing that was in my wallet was Smith. Everything else said my correct surname, Kirton. So I had my bank card, I had my dad's bank card, I had loads of student ID, I had my college swipe card. So on the swipe card, it had my face and my name with my student number. Everything in my wallet said my surname and who I was. So on our way to go to these universities, as we're coming out of the train station, the police officer, and they were doing searches at the gates. So we've now come to approach to go to the gate, but before we've got to the gate, the policemen are doing their searches, which is fine. So then they pull us up and they ask me to come to the side and they start questioning me, which is fine. I told them my name and where I'm going or the rest of it. And then he was like, we want to search you. And that's where it starts. Okay, so why do you want to search me? And the police used, in these times, I don't know how youngsters are being dealt with nowadays, but back then it was, well, if you don't want to accept me searching you, what are you trying to hide? And so your right to not be searched is infringed upon because of a suspicion that you must be hiding something, but you're not letting him do what he wants. So I've told him that I don't want to be searched. That's why I haven't done anything wrong. I explained like the legal aspects of why I didn't want to be searched. Cut a long story short, the situation starts to get a bit irate. So then I agree, okay, search. They've then taken out my wallet, seen all of these cards, and he's found the photo card, the one photo card that has Smith on it, and the rest is Kirton. He said that I've stolen that wallet, and my real surname is Smith. He then took the wallet into a corner, and a few of the police officers were standing like right in front of me, and I'm trying to see past them to see what he's doing with my wallet. Where are you going? He comes back, and what you can see on both photo cards is a slit where the photos are. And then what he said is that I've stolen the wallet. I've inserted my photo in the photo card of the Kirtons, and I've got my original photo as Smith, just so that to justify how I've come about obtaining this wallet. Cut a long story short, it ends up I get taken to the police station. My aunt has to come down, and then my aunt's very good with the law, and she tied them up in knots, and I was released. But that's just a small example of having these negative experiences with people that I was taught and expected to take care of you, but when it came down to your day-to-day interactions with them, that you were never seen as being okay. And I went with a group of people, and so black, white, Asian. It was a group of us. Out of that group, I was the one that was ushered aside and dealt with. And I think that that's just one story in a catalogue of stories of growing up in a society where the rules are designed to allow abuses of your what should be your freedoms. And this isn't an attack on white people, yeah. Like when we talk about the system, yeah, it's not talking about the layman in the street. Yeah, the layman in the street needs to appreciate that he's been born into something that, yes, he hasn't created, but he does benefit from it. And it's the differences between those benefits and the lack of wanting for a better expression, that is the tension that that black people try to help others understand. That when we go about our day-to-day lives, there is a big difference. There's a difference in the way that you're seen and in the way in which you're dealt with. And it's the history behind it that has brought us to a place today that people are saying, okay, enough is enough. Like my granddad went through this, my parents went through this, I went through this, I don't want this for my children. And I think it's that sequence of events that I think has contributed to the current situation. Sorry to have gone on so long.
No, but I think that last thing you touched on, particularly about, I guess, that tips into the white privilege bracket, doesn't it? You know, if you're fortunate enough, in some regards at least, to not know these things exist, then you benefit from that system, right? So, you know, police in my life have always been there to serve and protect, but then they serve and protect at whose cost, right? So they'll protect the white man at the cost of someone else's life. And we've seen that with the, what was it, Amy Cooper video recently in the park there, you know.
Crazy.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. You know, she knew exactly what she was doing. And that's like a case, that in a way was such a painful but perfect case study on a white person calling upon and knowing exactly the kind of privileges and biases that they benefit from in order to be able to get what they want. And it's so great, but it happens in these micro ways. And I think, like what you were saying, Sam, even though you're saying, you know, it's not an attack on white people. There's obviously a part for us to play in a sense of educating ourselves and and kind of waking up from the perfect system that we've kind of thought it to be all our lives, because it's in ignorance, isn't it? The privilege is in ignorance. And I think I've certainly not really understood it until I've met guys like you who've kind of explained it to me or lived alongside you and seen some of that. But you don't until you know, lots of people, it's very common, you know, lots of people out there, especially if they're, you know, first or second generation and moved over to this country, find a home with their own. And it's very difficult sometimes to break out of your own comfort zone. And I think especially I've noticed that you guys can tell me what you think. It's certainly been easier, I think, for black people to integrate into a white culture than it has been for white people to integrate into a predominantly black culture or environment. I think white people still struggle very much in general to do that, and often feel threatened by that still. And I think that predicates into the police and the hierarchy of society as well.
See, sorry, Khareem, I'm going to let you speak.
Go ahead, man. No, that's right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've not forgotten about you, Khareem.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Go ahead, Sam. See what you're saying, brother.
Yeah, so listeners or viewers, whichever way we want to describe it.
Both, yeah, they'll be listening either way.
Right? The term white privilege can sometimes be quite confusing because when we think of privilege, we think of financial benefits. Yeah, whenever we think of the word privilege, it means that someone has given something to me that I take advantage of, I'm fully aware of it, and I'm living and lounging in it. And white privilege is not that. It's not something that you're going to potentially be conscious of. And just to give you a bit of understanding of where this term's come from, it was a term that was coined by Peggy McIntosh. Is that correct? Yeah. In a paper that she wrote in 1988. And basically what she said was, just to give you a quick synopsis, is that she's come to realize that as a white lady, she could define around 46 unconscious benefits that she experiences as a white person in comparison to Black or Asian peers. She appreciates that it's not something that she was that she's earned or done anything to get. Yeah. It was something that she's born into, and because she's been born into it, it's helped her without her realizing. Yeah. And what she's done is she's then articulated all of these different points and how they have benefited her. So what's happened is that term now has now been brought back to highlight that there are benefits that white have been born into in the Western world that they don't realize benefits them, but really it does. And there are others who don't have those types of privileges. And you shouldn't be made to feel guilty at the fact that there is a privilege, because there's nothing you can do about it. It's not like you can just say, oh, well, let me just take off my skin. And like, you don't have to sacrifice your own peace and joy because you benefit from a system that you didn't create. But it is vitally important that you are aware that there is a privilege, because then you will be sensitive to the experiences of those who do not have that same entitlement. So just like how we can talk about the police, and you may have grown up and the police were there to protect you. Yeah, there are others where the police were a force for harassment, were a force for violence. And I think universally, what has to be remembered is that the police are the enforcers of the law, and the law is created by government, and the government is the one that has the agenda for the system. So you have to understand that for Black people, the majority of Black people who have had bad experiences with the police have been agents of an unjust system. And because they've been agents of an unjust system, the views of the actions of police are very sensitive to us. So when we see that a man has been killed at the hands of the police, that is, as far as we see it, an agent of an unfair system.
And that's why we're seeing that with the protests, because we've seen cops run over protesters, spray people who weren't, and rubber bullet people who were protesting peacefully, and you know, everyone, Asians, whites, Blacks, going at everybody, you know. And I think that's, for me, as well as a lot of other people, I think that's been a case of, okay, we've reached a point now where we can definitely say, we're not just making it up, that you know, Black people haven't just got a bone, you know,
it's not a chip on the shoulder.
Yeah, right, exactly, to go like, oh, what are we going on about again? You know, they're always raging on about the cops. If they just stopped, if they just listened, if they just complied, they would be fine, right? But we've definitely reached a point with George Floyd, and I think we've definitely reached a point when we've seen the police reaction on social media, things that people are recording. I watched one today where a guy's in his house, gets pepper sprayed in his house. And it's like, the guy's just calling out something wrong, that the police have just pepper sprayed someone who's walked past. They were just walking past. I don't think they were even protesting. I think they were just trying to get somewhere. And the police are just, there's like a dozen police, and they're just spraying these guys down and whatever. And the guy just shouts out of his window, like, obviously that's not on, and the guy's targeting him in his own house, protesters being shot at whilst they're in the confines of their own house, again, peacefully, guys being arrested for no reason. So I think that there's definitely been a heightened sense that whites and other people in the community want to stand with the black community and say, okay, we really do this time see that you're not making this up, because you can't refute it anymore, right? Like, it's literally plain for all to see. The way police have dealt with everything in the States, I think, is, on the most part, I think, been quite barbaric. We're heading to a martial law situation potentially, at the moment, which is crazy, and all of that whilst, whatever your views on Trump are, it'd be, whether you're the most diehard of Republicans, it's very difficult to stand with him right now, I think.
Yeah.
What's Khareem, tell us a little bit, from your side of things, what was life like growing up for you?
Well, growing up in the 60s, I was a little bit older than you guys, so it was a lot different from Sam growing up in the 80s. Sam, racism, you could feel it was tangible, and obviously I experienced it in the 80s as well, but the 60s was different in that it was evident in everything. There were no black people on TV. There were no role models. There was nothing. You just grab onto any grain of salt you could grab to give you comfort or encouragement, and there weren't many of those around. So, for the early part of my life, I think there was a lack of how can I put it? The community was close because we had to depend on each other, because there wasn't very much else outside of that community to depend on. So yeah, I enjoyed my childhood tremendously, despite the racism. But because I was involved in lots of sports, I was, really any sport, athletics, rugby, cricket, football, you name it, I was in it. And so a lot of my time was taken up playing sports, and it kind of blotted out some of the racism. But although you would meet in matches that Sam was talking about, the N-word did crop up a few times, on the pitch, especially when you were tormenting another opposition player. I remember one occasion when this guy said to me, who do you think you are? My grandfather fought in the war. I was laughing. I thought, what the hell has that got to do with me playing football against you? But he was so tormented by the fact that we were beating him that he had to go back and reach back for the war and his grandfather serving in there. And what am I doing here, etc., etc. But you mentioned a couple of things, power and ignorance, and I think those are two telling things. And I think ultimately racism is about power, but that power doesn't include the ordinary people. And I think whether white or black, everybody has to understand this is a class struggle, a class war, really. And I think people don't get it. The racist bit is a creation to play off one side against the other, so that the power element of society can do what they do. All right. Maybe that might need a bit more explaining. So the average, ordinary black or white man is in the same position as far as the power element is concerned. Yeah. But racism is created to create this friction on that base level, so that nobody actually realizes what's going on at a higher level. So we're preoccupied, Sam, everyone's preoccupied with racism, tackling racism, really created a manufactured ideology, if you like, to keep people busy with their everyday lives, while other people can do, the power element of society can do what they do, manipulation of people's minds. And
it's very 1984, isn't it? It's this great
distraction
of
it is. It is true, and that's what it is, and it's about power ultimately, So, I mean, if you think about growing up in the 60s, I mean, the programs you watch in the 70s, the language used on TV in some of the programs, if you watch reruns today, you would say, how did they get away with that? I'm sorry, seeing programs, Nig Nog, Chalky, all things like that. That was part of the language.
White guys blacking up, Jim Crow, all this stuff.
All that, or black and white minstrel show was on Saturday every morning, every evening, Saturday. I mean, those things, if you if you collated, made a montage or collage of that, today. It showed that, people were like, what the hell is this? But that's what we used to see. That was part of our daily lives, and that's the language we used to hear day in, day out.
What was that like, Khareem? Because I guess you sort of came in on the back of the sort of Windrush generation, didn't you? So what was that?
Yeah,
What was that kind of whole experience like? Because again, you've got a British government or a British Empire essentially, that have colonized a lot of the world,
yes.
and now have kind of promised, there's this promised land in the UK for a lot of West Indian people to
streets paved with
come
gold
and work here and be treated as equals and all that stuff. What was that like? The promise versus the reality.
Well, to be honest, I didn't know anything about the promise because I was too young, that promise was obviously my parents would have been offered that, if indeed they were. But certainly, I didn't see any promise. Growing up, there was a lack of promise that I saw. Lack of opportunities and so on and so forth. But I think that kind of strengthened, gave me a resolve, and made me resilient, and made me into the kind of person, if you say I can't do something, then I'm going to show you that I can, kind of attitude. So it was always my intention to make myself, the opposite of what people or what society thought we were. So
I do think there is you mentioned something, Khareem, that I thought was really good, and you talked about having to band together and come together, within your own community and stuff like that. Certainly in those early days in the '60s, and I think that kind of even that in itself, I think, often represents certainly a threat to the white man, because we don't have. It's very difficult to pin down what white culture looks like, right? We talk about Black culture, Black music, Black arts, Black history. When you dig into it, it's actually very easy to see, hopefully, the impact that Black people have had on society. And certainly, it's easy to see the impact that white people have had on society. But what I'm saying is, we've not got that same sense of often confidence, of banding together, of grouping together. And I think that adversity has had played a large part. Anything in the negative that happens, there's always this uprising, there's always this positive element to it, this banding together, this strengthening of resolve. And I think that's something that I think has been often a threat to whatever white culture is to see a Black community come together. And I think in times like this, it's nice to see, because I think that is shifting a little bit, because you are starting to see people stand together. But I think in times gone by, it's to me as an observer, perhaps sometimes it seemed like that Black community has represented a bit of a threat.
Well, I think what you have now is that in those days growing up, you very much had divided communities where everybody, you had Blacks here and whites there and whoever else, everywhere else. You don't have that now. Particularly in London, there's no such thing. I don't know, Sam, you agree? All these kids are growing up together.
Yeah.
You close your eyes and you hear somebody speak. You don't know who's speaking, whether it's a Black person or a white person. They will sound the same now. Whereas we could clearly make a distinction when we were growing up as to who was who. Now you don't know that. Everyone uses the same language. Everyone the same. Everyone dresses the same. Everyone likes the same music. Those barriers are gone. In those cultural barriers, if you like, that made it sort of people distinct from one another in that way culturally. So that helps in that you see that protests you see today, not just in England or not just in America. Anywhere you have those societies where everyone is like, this black and white thing is becoming less of an issue, if you like, in the way that it used to be. I think you find that, and I was touched by some of the things I've seen. I'm sure you have, Sam. Seen, all communities coming out outraged by this thing. Outrage, genuine outrage too, not just not a false outrage or playing to the gantry. This is a genuine outrage. People lying down in the street, people saying, "I can't breathe." That thing touched me. So there's this sense that, and we've been saying we can't breathe for a long time. For 400 years, we haven't been able to breathe. We've been crying out for oxygen for a long time. At some point, there's always this watershed moment's going to happen. We don't know when, but when it happens, if we're alive and we see it, then we're part of it. I think that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing And it's not a single event, by the way. Sometimes, when you're in something, you don't see the big picture until maybe 10, 15 years. And then you say, wow, did all this happen in that period of time? Look at the amount of change. But when you're going through the change, you don't actually see it happening. It's only a reflection that you see that. And I think so in the last 20, 25 years, maybe 30 years, there's been lots of things happening. I think when you put them together, you see the bigger picture and you think, wow, all that's happened and we didn't know.
What sort of changes are we looking for, on the back of things like this? And again, this is a 400-plus-year-old thing. It's not going to be solved in a day, and it's certainly been around for a long time already. Off the back of things like these protests and this rioting, and what are we looking for to change? What do we want to see that's different? And again, this all takes time, right? This is an individual problem as well as a systemic problem.
Well, to me, the problem is simple. Sam mentioned economics at the beginning of the program, talking about, if you haven't got wealth, and I'm talking about not individuals, I'm talking about cumulative wealth, I'm talking about states and countries. If they don't have wealth, then they don't have power. And I think unless they're, this age-old thing that everyone runs away from, which is reparations, and that is the root word of reparations, is repair. Now, that doesn't just mean money. There's been no repairing of the people who have been traumatized in that 400-year period. So that is a dangerous situation to be in. That's like a time bomb, really, a ticking time bomb. And we're seeing those things now. So unless governments, all those governments that were partakers in this imperialist project, if you want to call it that, in where they just willy-nilly go into countries, take them over, take all their resources and stuff, impoverish them, and enrich themselves. Unless there is an admittance from those countries that we have to repair this, we have to do something to fix this. It's not going to fix itself. That's a starting point for me. Those countries have to be recompensed. People have to be recompensed in some way. So there's some kind of economic parity. Because otherwise, if we see George, we saw how George was killed. He wasn't Chinese, was he? He wasn't American, Italian. He wasn't Greek, he wasn't German. That doesn't happen to any of those people. Why does it happen to black people? Because they have no power. If they had power, if Africa was a strong motherland country, and these things were happening all the time, which they are, then they could say, well, hold on, America, if this doesn't stop, we're going to stop our oil export to you. We're going to stop giving you these minerals. We're going to stop the gold shipments. We're going to stop the diamonds. You understand? But we don't own those things in our own land. You see? And then you'll see change, because it's only by hurting the capitalist economy that you see these people take notice of you. They don't mind demonstrations. They don't mind riots. They can absorb that, because they just say, well, let's keep quiet and we'll absorb the noise. Once the noise dies down, things will go back to normal. Yeah. But what they don't like and what they don't want is a challenge to the economic status of the countries, and that is where it starts.
That's a whole deconstruction of capitalism as we know it, though, isn't it? That's
exactly.
That's massive.
That's why it hasn't happened. You see?
Yeah.
And that's like, as you were touching on, Khareem, that's bigger than, well, not necessarily be bigger, but that's far-reaching than any color, creed, or race, whatever. It's the whole gamut. It's the whole system, isn't it?
Yeah.
That everybody lives within.
Yeah.
That some people benefit from more than others. But that's the thing. Again, that's the thing about power and privilege, and that unfortunately is given to one color and taken away from another. Currently, the person who benefits from it's never going to want to give it up.
Precisely, and that's the problem, you see. So eventually, what will happen is that, that's how revolutions take place. Eventually, because people don't want to give up what they've got, because if you haven't got that vision to see that if I don't do something soon about something and offer something, then people will take it. And that's the
thing about what we're experiencing with rioting, because there's again been, I'm sure you'll have seen and read, there's so many opinions going about rioting, violence. Is it ever right to riot? Should all these protests be peaceful? And it's very difficult to imagine, certainly in the last 20 to 30 years, riots that really have changed a whole. I mean, you got like 92 in LA, Flint, and a few other things, you know, that have happened. Bloody Sunday and things like this. But it's really difficult to imagine what that looks like for us to overthrow a government and to literally force through reform. But it's painful, isn't it? And I think that's the thing. There's never going to be. There's always going to be casualties in this. You know, there's people in the media. You know, black business owners standing outside saying, "No, why have you looted my store? You know, I'm just starting off. It's my first year of business. I don't know how I'm going to cover the cost of this either. You know, what you're doing is wrong." And certain celebrities, you know, rallying against these violent protests. And then others, you might say, throughout history, I wonder what Malcolm X might think. I wonder what the Panthers might think, you know, about some of these things versus MLK and others. You know, you think, well, you know, Nelson Mandela. You know, it's even within. There's not always a right and wrong, is there, with all these things? It's a kind of but it's a big. There is a big cost to pay, and it will hurt a lot of people. But there's, like you say, Khareem, there's something right at the top. There's a bigger thing to all of this to remember. And I think once all of the fires have stopped and everything's calmed down, it's what's the world going to look like? Can all of this actually be used for something good? Can we drive it to reform? But it's a very complex situation, and much bigger than any one of us. You know, it takes everybody. I think it really does, and I think people are starting to get a grasp for that now. That it really takes everybody, you know, rallying for local government. You know, I know it's not really, you know, it's not the sort of sexiest place to be, is it? Sort of local government and petitioning councillors and things like that. You know, people who run your local villages and towns. But a lot of good happens there, and a lot of things that make a difference happen there. And with the polling and voting happening in the States recently, you know, that people have had a chance or getting a chance to make a difference. You know, what was it? Killer Mike did a little speech, didn't he? You know, saying about beating up your governors at the voting booth. I thought it was a really good phrase.
Yeah, I think the situation now, which is and this is where momentum is going to be quite key, because in the United States this is an election year, and I think that the best way, like you said, to start the process of change is voting. And I think that we're going to see the largest uptake in voters from minority groups this year. I think I'm anticipating record numbers of
young people. I think as well.
Yeah, exactly, and young people from all demographics that are going to look to get involved and change this system. I think for me, what do I expect to change from this? First and foremost, a mindset. I'm anticipating a complete change in mindset, in perception of the issues that now need to be addressed. I think before everyone was okay sleeping and saying, "Oh yeah, do you know what? Nothing's happened," or like we're okay. In the slumber of silence, people have been okay, and now this has happened. People have woken up again. And the thing is, they've woken up to the exact same nightmare that they fell asleep to the last time, thinking, do you know what, it's not going to happen again. That's surely the last time. And now that they've been woken up by this nightmare again, they're like, I cannot go to sleep on this same issue again, because I cannot wake up to this happening again. And I think...
Just before I forget what you said, sorry to interrupt you, where you said voting and record number of voters. I think you might be right. Except the only problem with that is, who are they voting for? Because you want the change and they're coming out to make a change, but who are the candidates that we're presented with?
Good question.
And in democracy is not real.
Yeah, it's a deception. I knew you were going to say that.
No, you mean it's not, is it?
Because, no, you're right. I know what you mean. Picking between the wolf and the lion.
Yeah, because they're all ravenous wolves. They're coming to devour us anyway. You know,
they're both hungry.
They're both hungry. And the thing about it is, it's not. This is a trick, isn't it? You think about it. Look, we get some candidates to vote for. Where have they come from?
Yeah.
Did we choose the candidates? No, they're presented to us. Here's the candidates for you to choose from. Hold on a minute. Where did they come from? We didn't choose those candidates as possibles, did we? But we're given them. So that is the problem. That's the root problem, is that we It's not true.
People have to run. That's the important thing. Like, I think people have to be open to getting involved into politics. And I think this is where when people are disenfranchised, they don't get involved in politics. And
I agree.
And I think what the viewers need to understand is the black community, yeah, in as much as we live in this society amongst people, yeah, because we don't trust this system, there is a lack of engagement from a political standpoint.
But also, when you do engage the system, you need money. You need money, because people may, with all the will in the world, come up with some wonderful manifesto, wonderful ideas. But if people don't hear your ideas, or you don't have sufficient money behind you to promote yourself so people can actually hear you and see you, then you just disappear into the ether. It's almost as if you've never existed, you see. So at the end of the day, it still comes back to that same power thing again, isn't it? You know, you need backup, you need people to promote you, you know.
How do you think, Khareem, because I think this feeds into what you were saying a little bit earlier and links into what you're saying now as well. How do you think this system that we live in right now has driven the black community apart? Because there's lots of conversation about, actually, if the black community was able to rally together a lot stronger, to pull resources together, again, still within a very racially biased system, but actually that we'd be able to do a lot more. But actually, I think there's an argument to be said that the system kind of divides that community in many ways. Do you think that's fair? And how do you think that happens?
Well, the system dividing black community, definitely. That's the idea. I mean, you know, if you have, if you want to keep power in perpetuity, whoever you perceive to be your rival or enemy or whatever, you have to keep them at loggerheads with themselves. And that's a age-old system that is designed to promote longevity, and it works. You know, so if we keep people, you know, Sam talked about it earlier on. His mom and dad, Barbados, Jamaica. Hey, Sam, and we know the banter there. I mean, some of us now we laugh at, that's nonsense. All it is that your slave ship went left and mine went right, but somebody's made something out of that because your accent is different. But you started the journey at the same point. Yeah, but now because of separation, you have a different accent, or you're on a smaller island, and they've made something out of that to make a distinction between the peoples. Now that's nonsense. That is absolute nonsense. You know, the people have this pride in the islands in which they've been ensconced on for a little while, but they were deposited there, you know, and they've made something of that. That's not where you're from. That's like a stop off on the journey, you know. And like Sam was saying, you mentioned Barbados and things, but the other islands, you know, everyone has this inter-island rivalry thing. But everybody mostly started the journey at the same point. If you go back, that the ships went to a different destination, and over time you develop different accents. So it's really stupid for people to be so proud of these islands that we come from, to the extent where it's going to divide me and you.
I think the division of the family is a key component to maintaining the social division. And I don't know how many people are aware of this, but the letter by Willie Lynch to all of the slave owners at the time, and he came up with this idea that if you take the male, if you take the male and you beat him quite badly, like how you beat a horse, until you break him in front of the black woman and child. And the aim is to do that, to impose a fear in the black woman, to raise the young black boy to be physically strong, but neglecting his mental strength. So he becomes physically strong, but mentally weak. And the aim of that was to get the family focus on, don't be like that. Don't grow to be controlled, or don't grow to be beaten up. Be strong, be strong, be strong. But the dynamic of the black home, because the thing is, once the black home's broken, what has been proven, I was talking to my brother about this today, actually, in a separate conversation, is that a lot of social ills are created from broken homes where there is no male. And where there is no male, dysfunction or where there isn't a two-parent household, dysfunction of the produce of that household, the likelihood of dysfunction is increased. And what we see is that whole idea consistently perpetuated through society when it comes to black males in society. So when we're talking, if you look at, and I hate the justice system in the United States, to be honest, but even if we just look at it over here, and the disproportionate penalties for non-violent crimes and small things, all of these things affect the dynamics of the home. That when a male is not present and isn't able to maintain the dynamic of that home, the produce of that home are more likely, not always, this is definitely going to happen, but we're looking at probabilities, the probability of the produce of that home ending up either repeating the same cycle or coming to an unproductive state in their life is increased. And we were talking about capitalism, and capitalism requires the have-nots. It requires poor people. It needs poor people to function, because in order for you to have, someone cannot have. And this system is designed to produce enough dysfunction that the lower levels of the menial tasks and requirements are met, that there is less, that it decreases the chances of people climbing the social scale to challenge certain ideas and ideals. And that's why when you look at, if we appreciate that poverty is created by a lack of education, yeah, or education is one of the greatest contributors to poverty and crime, yeah, or a lack of it. If we accept that, yeah, I think you may need to. That looks like it's me. You can remove them. But if we accept that, then by accepting that, the government, if we accept that that's true and the government understand this, the last thing that the government should be doing in a plan to reduce poverty is to cut budgets to schools. Yeah, the education system should be at the forefront of everything that we do, because we understand that by educating people and getting them better educated, they can get better jobs, which means they can get better pay, which generates more taxes, which enables people and so the ills of society to be reduced. It means crime will be reduced because people will have more. Yeah, and so
but there's no intention for that, Sam, as you said in a minute ago.
So this is where we can see that, well, when you're cutting budgets, then you're understanding that you're contributing to poverty, which is going to increase crime.
Of course.
You see what I mean? And it's these types of agendas that give us an insight when if we pay attention to the focus of what we deem to be the system, and the way in which it has to be dealt with. And like I said, it's because of these agendas that youngsters or the next generation become even more disenfranchised with the system, that they don't vote, that they don't pay attention to elections, they don't understand the parliamentary procedures. If you were to ask a group of young people now, who's the Chancellor? What does the Chancellor do? Okay, who's the Deputy Prime Minister? Like, okay, just simple questions about the dynamics of Parliament. Yeah, they won't have a clue.
But that's black or white, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. Youngsters, because the educational system is broken. And because of that, it's not encouraging people at the lower levels of the economic spectrum to be involved, to fight for the needs of those from those same economic backgrounds. And that's why we're seeing that Parliament at the higher levels are elitist ideals. And anyone who comes along and tries to challenge those elitist ideals is classed as an extreme leftist, or you get banded with all of these titles that completely diminish the issues that you try to highlight.
This is why I said at the beginning, at the top of it, this is a class war.
Right. So my question now is, now we've moved to another level now, haven't we? Which is like putting society in general to rights. But my question, linking it back to where we've come from, is why is the black community such a threat?
That's a good question. Khareem?
Because they could have picked any amount. They could have picked on all sorts of, I mean, again, I guess in a way, this class war discriminates against everyone of that lower class, of that poorer nature, of those who cannot and who cannot afford to, in some way equally, because if you're poor, and you're rich, you'll be made richer. But there is this, the conversation at the moment is around Black Lives Matter, right? Mm. So, and I don't think anybody would argue that that's out of place. So maybe from a historical point, for even going back 400 or 500 years, why blacks? Why not anyone else? And how is that presented a threat to what a white society has created?
There's several questions there. So why blacks? Let's take that one in a minute. The other question is, you said, why are black people seen as a threat? Well, if you have to campaign and say Black Lives Matter, then you're not a threat. Yeah, think about it for a minute. So if we have to go on the street and shout and say we matter, then you're not seen as a threat. You're seen as expendable. So, and that's what we've been seeing. Why blacks? Is because where blacks lived, there were plenty of resources that other people wanted, and ultimately, that's what attracted people to those places, Africa and so on. Is the abundance of resource when put up against Europe. At the time, a lot of people don't actually know, and that's the problem with history, is that, to the detriment of everybody, black and white, real history is not taught.
Yeah, agree.
And I think everyone suffers because of that.
I agree.
It would be, if the real history, the true history was taught, then everyone would have a greater understanding, and there wouldn't be this us and them thing in the way that we see it. And understanding that racism is a creation, it never existed in history, prior to a couple of 100 years ago. It's an invention. It's exacerbation of differences, and creation of different races and stuff. If people knew how this was created, they would laugh and think how stupid it is. You see, but it's all about, ultimately, it's about power. It's about resources and the acquisition of resources and holding them in perpetuity, which is, after all, the slave trade was given the rubber stamp, if you like, by the Pope Nicholas V in 1452, and then ratified in 1454. Two papal bulls, as they call them, these edicts they issued. One was Romanus Pontifex, and the other one was Dum Diversus, one Latin, until different, and the Roman Pontiff, and which he gave the Portuguese king, Alfonso V, the right to subdue, and hear the language, subdue Saracens anywhere in the world in perpetuity, so forever, you see, and everything, and resources, everything, and of course the church get their cut as well. So,
you okay, Khareem? You still with us?
Hello.
I wonder if I said something blasphemous there.
Yeah, the system's trying to shut us down, man.
Yeah, but yeah,
you've been listening.
So,
sorry.
Going back to what you're saying, why blacks? I think it's because ultimately, we had the resources, we had the wealth, and others wanted it.
And that's a human condition. I mean, that's a time-old problem going back tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years.
But the chattel slavery is new,
right?
Aspect of it that was new. People always, this whole idea of slavery taking on a different type of manifestation.
Yeah.
In the chattel slavery element, people always captured captives from war, But you see in other societies how war captives have risen through the ranks to become very high up in society. There was never this thing that you're my slave and you're never going to be anything else but a slave. Kind of thing. In civilizations and other eras and other epochs, you see former slaves rising to greatness.
That's very interesting.
Not inhibited by the system, as Sam was saying. Yeah. But this chattel slavery is a new thing. That you're my slave and you will be my slave in perpetuity forever. Yeah. Nothing else. You can't read. You're not allowed to have anything. You're not allowed to educate yourself. You're not allowed to do this and that.
And I guess the thing about it now is that, they say, don't they, certainly in the States, they've got more black people incarcerated in that form of slavery than there were ever slaves across the plantations of the States. before. So, you could certainly argue that we're in a worse place in some ways than we were before. But I think the tone of it now seems to be, well, taking it back to what we've witnessed recently, lots of people might say, I recognise that what that police officer did was wrong. And I would never, I'm not a racist, I would never do anything like that. So therefore, that's case closed, conversation is finished, right? Because I think most people would unanimously agree, one, that was wrong, and they would never do anything like that. So it might be fair for them in their mind to assume that the conversation is finished because they believe that everybody should be treated equally. Then we've got to look at this systemic problem that we've been talking about, and the way that it's built within a society before we were born, that you, Sam, were talking about, the society that we're born into, right? So it's the way that we benefit from that system. And I think that's maybe been used as a way to kind of excuse things. Getting back to the more racist discussion, is that we know that we wouldn't go out there and kill someone else. As a white man, I could say, all right, I wouldn't go out there and kill a black guy just because he's black. Right? But then what other elements of my life are hypocritical when it comes to that conversation? And I think that's where the conversation has been a little bit more difficult now for people to have, because they've got to do a lot more soul searching. Because before, you could go, I own slaves, or I don't own slaves. Right? Whereas now you can go and go, well, no one owns slaves, do we really? And then you kind of go, well, even if we're looking at all the disproportionate amount of black people that are incarcerated in America, which is, I think, still a much more non-white country, I think, than the UK. I think it's like something like 61% non-white in the States. There's still some people will say, well, they had it coming, But even that's, it's easier for them to justify than say, well, at least I don't own any slaves. It's not like it was. We're making progress. But the other side of the argument is then, well, okay, this is a much more subtle thing that we're dealing with right now, because we're looking at the whole system, right? It's like and it's always been the case that we've needed to look at that. It's the case of now, I think it's much more easier than ever for people who benefit from the privilege to switch off, but much more necessarily that they don't. I think so. I think again, speaking from probably my perspective, we're not used to this level of discomfort. And even with you two guys, I don't think we've ever really had this kind of discussion before. We've just been kind of friends. We've never really delved into how I benefit from a system that you don't benefit from. We've just kind of lived our lives alongside each other. We've never really felt always the need to go into it, although we've shared perspectives and things like that before. But now that this conversation's opened up, I think it's been really beneficial. But it's actually a conversation that, and I think probably, again, that's why to whatever the white community is, or the other side of the argument, that's why it seems more uncomfortable, because black community has been used to be talking about this stuff for years, right? So sometimes it comes across really strong, because they're going, yeah, this, Black Lives Matter, I can't breathe, like, you can't treat us this way, this, that, and the other, like, and some white people are like, this is a lot, right? Like, this seems like, it feels like an attack, it feels like an attack on us, but in a way, it's I think he did it. What's her name? Jane Elliott. She's the white lady who does, who's like been an activist, yeah. Yeah. And she's on a stage in the theatre. I don't know if you've seen this one.
Yeah, I was going to talk about this. Go on, go.
Right.
No, please do it. Please, go on.
I think the question is like the question is just, put your hand up or stand up if you would like to be treated the way that black people are treated in this country, right? Yeah. And nobody stands up, and she says, well, let me repeat I don't think you understand. Let me repeat the instruction. Stand up if you would like to be treated the way that black people are treated in this country. No one stands up. And then again, she goes on to explain, well, that shows that exactly. That you benefit from the system, right? And that you would not like to be treated. So again, it's ignorance is, it does it really exist, right? It's like, I don't know the whole story. And I certainly don't know it firsthand. And I think the idea isn't for us to replicate a black experience that we haven't had, right? But it is to do a bit of research, educate yourself, and come alongside and speak up for things that matter. And again, like you saying, Khareem, within this class war to actually elevate everybody. But it does show things like that people do have a basic understanding that they have ignorance isn't an excuse. It really isn't.
Yeah,
because it doesn't exist. Truly,
what I love about that experiment is that if you watch it, and if you're watching this, you have to find it. I'll
put a link.
Yeah, please. Because the beautiful thing about it is it removes any veil of excuse. Because the question is being asked by a white person,
right,
to a white audience, about a white issue. And she's so intelligent with the way that she's done it. And I've watched the majority of her experiments, and they are very painful. They are very painful to watch. Like, even as a black person, I'm watching that, and even I'm like she done one about the color of your eyes, and such a powerful experiment. But the point that she's making, which is really interesting, is how much attention we pay to the treatment of other people, and whether we would be able to tolerate, or would we desire to be treated like that. And the power of that is that nobody can hide from their own choice. Everyone in that room left that room knowing that they are aware that there is a section of society that is treated a way that they themselves would never want to be treated.
Yeah.
And it's powerful. It's a powerful example, because now, because when you think of that experiment in light of current events, what it does is it removes another layer of excuse. So when people become aware of these things, and then they see the impact of their lack of action on day-to-day life, because the excuse is removed, the next port of call is, well, I know it's going on. I've seen now what happens. Okay, now I'm being called to action. What am I going to do about it? And I think that the beautiful thing is that voters are getting younger and they're more conscious. And I really do think, and the thing is, the older generation, as sad as it is to say, because they're getting older, they're dying out, and a new breed of mindsets is coming through. And that consciousness of social ills is becoming more and more, and being brought more and more to the forefront. And the reason why I was saying that policy is going to be the next thing is because now people see these experiments, and social media is such a powerful thing that those videos are shared and people can see, and it starts conversations like this one. Because people are now being confronted with what is actually going on and what is true, and being given just a small insight into the experiences of others, plus they're seeing the injustices, it's now bringing us all to the point of making us question the choices of our votes, the choices of our politics, the choices of all of these decisions, because now we're realizing, do you know what? Voting for so-and-so may benefit me in this area, but can I handle the impact of it affecting me in this area? So I'm really interested. I'm so interested in what's going to happen in the American politics later on in this year. I'm really interested. And they've got some local elections. I think they had some on the 2nd of May, if I'm not mistaken. 2nd of June. Sorry,
yeah.
I'm not mistaken. And I really want to see. Because now what we're going to start seeing is that government officials and local government is going to be held more accountable. And the reason why I pay attention to the United States is because what happens in the United States has a ripple effect everywhere else. And it creates a culture that is then brought into in the UK. And I'm going to be paying close attention, because I'm very interested. But I think that mindset is going to lead to a big influx. Even when you look at Jeremy Corbyn's impact in the Labour Party, he got the highest numbers of young people involved and engaged, because people are becoming more socially aware. And the social ills and the disparity between rich and poor and the divide is so big that people are now saying, do you know what, these people that have been talking about these ills for so long, there might be some truth to this actually. And because there's some truth, do you know what? We may need to start getting involved and start doing some stuff about this.
But you see what happens to Jerry Corbyn. You see how
I know.
these hidden agendas, you see this anti-Semitic thing come from nowhere.
Yeah.
Let me just move your
camera down.
Camera, because I can't quite see you.
You can't see you. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, that's it. There you are. See that handsome face.
I was just saying that, Jerry Corbyn, all of a sudden from nowhere, you see all this anti-Semitic talk.
Yeah.
That destroyed him.
Yeah.
So, the promise of what he was coming with, son, I think he's a very genuine guy, They're probably one of the few guys that I thought in politics, I think, actually could believe what he was saying, but they destroyed him.
He didn't help himself. I'm not going to sidetrack the discussion. He didn't help himself by refusing to make a definitive stand. And to be fair, he had some very extreme social views. Yeah, but for me, it's not necessarily about everything he stood for that is my focus. It's more about what he done for the conscious minds of young people. Young people were more engaged in social politics than they had been in a very long time. And when you look at the members of the Labour Party, he increased a large number of young people to get involved. And I think it's that awareness that is now kicking in, that young people are beginning to see social issues as something that, and politics as something that they want to get involved with. I think that my main interest really is how that filters down through all aspects of the society. So because I do think that there is still a large portion, especially within the Black community, that is disenfranchised. And because they're disenfranchised with society, they don't participate in the due process of voting and electing. And I think the moment that there is that connection, we can then start to see candidates that we believe in, not just Black candidates, but candidates that are interested in social issues.
I don't care what candidate looks like. Justice is what I want. You know what I mean? If you're bringing justice and truth, then you got my vote. Bottom line, I don't care what you look like. Be a Martian.
So it's someone that connects with social issues. That's the point. That if people, if the impact of what's been started, it filters down with the engagement of young people, that we're going to start to see representatives who will be willing to stand up for justice on all issues.
I agree.
The thing is, Chris, you say you don't care what the candidate looks like, right? But we still got a huge swathe of society that does. So it's getting to a point where we get people to listen to the truths rather than look at what it's
appearance.
It's a miracle in some way we've had Obama as a president already. We've certainly not had we've not got to that point here.
Well, I think Mark, touching on that statement you just made, that shows the futility in some ways of the whole thing, because you might have looked the part, but what can you actually do? Do you have any real power?
Yeah.
Who's really pulling the strings? These people are insidious and very clever. On the face of things, you think you got what you wanted all along. The whole world celebrated when Obama got elected, didn't it?
Yeah.
People in China, Russia, had nothing to do with the process or, any immediate benefit. Everyone was like, oh, wow, this is great. Wow. But, if you ask Black people in America, what did Obama do for you or for Black people? They would say nothing. Nothing. It looked great and it was promising at the beginning, but what did he do? Nothing. And that maybe not his fault, because maybe how much power do you actually have? I think that's why I was saying back to you, Sam, you said at the beginning of capitalism, you said that you mentioned the hierarchy, the structure at the bottom. There has to be people at the bottom for capitalism to work. And so, no matter what they say with their mouths, we're going to spend big on education, we know that's not true, because if everyone's educated, who's going to work in their factories? We know they have no intention of doing that. You see.
But school and education for a while has always been a kind of conveyor belt to the workforce, hasn't it? Basically, it's been like that since the Industrial Revolution. Really, it's sit yourself down at a desk to learn what you need to equip you to go out and work. It's not there to equip you for a lifetime of learning.
The enterprise, yeah.
That's not what it is.
Absolutely.
You know, you never get taught how to do a tax return, or how to fact check what a politician is saying.
Absolutely.
You never get taught that stuff. It's learn the basics of reading and writing. Keep yourself active so that you can move your body and you can lift boxes and you can do manual labor, and off you go when you're 16.
Exactly.
Or 18 as it is now.
Exactly.
You know, that's what they're interested in, and that's why the education system has been, in my opinion, so stagnant, is because it's still churning out. It's still churning out people like we're in the 1800s. You know, about to go and work down the cotton mill. It is a broken system, and you know, certainly for, I don't know how it was for you guys, but certainly for me, we never learned anything about Joseph Boulogne or Harriet Tubman.
Oh my God! I mean,
any of these guys. You know, we didn't learn about the Underground Railroad or the role that Gurkhas and black people and Indians played in World War II. You know, we didn't learn about any of that stuff. You know, about
and neither did schools in London either. You know,
we were taught. You know, you get taught a kind of supremacy, don't you? And I think as a white person, again, not to make all of this about race, but it just happens in these subconscious ways. You attribute a supremacy to yourself, because as a white person, because you are taught about the Great British Empire, but you never taught about, you know, we never learned about the Crusades. We never learned about the mistreatment of Africans across the continent. You know, we didn't know about any of that stuff. And so
it's the absence of others, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, it's the education is to learn it late. It's easier to teach it earlier on. And this is another thing I want to come on to, is how we can educate our kids, you know, about this stuff early on, because it's easy to just learn it from the start. You know, it's almost like you, Sam, and you, Khareem, you know, your parents and grandparents, however painful that experience was, is just setting the expectation with you from the start. You're a black boy, you're going to experience these things, you're going to have to work harder than others. But if we can teach our kids the other narrative, which is like, look, let's learn about histories from all across the world, you know, that to use the phrase in hopefully the correct way, that all lives do matter. And there'll be certain points in time where, you know, we need to fight for the marginalized and whatever. But you know, that all life is, we're a human race, right? We're not split. We don't want to be split into races and treated a certain way because we look a certain way, or we're expected to speak a certain way because we're black or white or from here. You know, again, what you were saying, Khareem, our skin color and our accent is no indication necessarily of where we're from anymore. You get guys that look like they're from the Caribbean speaking Mandarin. You know, you get Chinese guys speaking patois. You get, you know, white guys speaking all sorts of, you know, Swahili. You know, like it doesn't.
Swahili, I love it, Mark.
Right, but it's not anymore. We're a globalized race now.
You made a point very well. Yeah.
Right, so if we can educate people, and I'm really passionate about learning. I think probably we all are. It's one thing that I think the three of us really share, is a passion for learning and development. If we can get to a point where we can teach our kids and we can start to educate the communities that we live in about some of the history. You know, doing that show with you, Khareem, we've been one of the biggest educators for me in life. You know, wow. It really was. You know, because I got to hear those. If you haven't, anyone listening, if you haven't, is there somewhere they can find the show? Is it? Yeah. Go and find it out. The first one was called The Voices of Black Folk, wasn't it? Well, that's the
that's a series, isn't it? It's a theme, isn't it? So
it's a series, yeah. You know, go and I'll put links to it and go.
Yeah, we were going to do it, and it was every year we do it. It was going to happen again in this year, but obviously the virus knocked it out. But we got dates for next year, you know, up through the year next year. So yeah, so we're looking forward to that. And I just found it as a great way to. That's the extension of education for me. That's all it was for me. It's just a way of teaching. Straight, you know, and I think.
And it's so necessary, and I think you feel like when you learn something new that's so big, or you learn about some of these characters that are so big, you know, when you hear a story of someone like David Walker or Marcus Garvey or whatever, like you know, or you read these autobiographies, it's almost like, where have you been all my life? Do you know what I mean? Because you never get told about it, and then you're like, I'm 30 years old, right? So I was probably like, what, 26, 27 when we did the show. It'd been like, you know, like no, I'd never even heard these names before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I think it's a really freeing experience, but I think there's like for me, there's like a process that you go through, which is like uncomfort or like uncomfort, and then there's a bit of like sort of disbelief, because you don't know why, you don't understand what you don't know about
where
it
they've been all this time.
It's like the first time you like have a friend or whatever that's from a marginalized community, and they tell you that like the cops beat up on them or whatever, and you're going like, yeah, but that doesn't happen to me, so how does it happen to you, right?
Yeah, honestly, sure. Yeah.
And then like the disbelief of the information you're receiving, and then there's this great acceptance of it, and a great relief, and a really enjoyable process of learning something new. But it's getting through the discomfort bit, right? That's the bit that's I think. And again, I can only speak. Sorry if I've made it a bit about me, but I can only speak from personal experience. Like that's the bit. I remember coming to live in London. Like I moved to Lewisham, and I wouldn't say it's predominantly black, but it's probably more one of the blackest counties of London, right? And you got people from all, but I never felt like marginalized or whatever. I mean, I never felt like whatever. But you have to get over the uncomfort of walking into a room and you're the only like white. I'd never been the only white guy before, right? So it's just like it's comical for everybody else. It's like and probably it's a little bit unnerving for me at first. But then you figure but then these are things you're born with,
the
right?
Safest place you can be, Mark. Trust me.
Honestly, you're not born with them. These are things that you like develop over time, and you're just thrown into these situations. So for anyone listening who doesn't know me, so me and Sam and Khareem, we were part of the same church, which was based in Lewisham. Which is, I would say, I don't know if it still is, was predominantly black church, I guess, made up of mostly people from Jamaican, Nigerian, and Ghanaian backgrounds. Would that be fair to say? And some other Caribbean nations as well. But basically, so you walk into a situation and the tables are turned, right? And this is the thing, is like what I was saying earlier. I think that it's become much more usual or much more ordinary for I guess the black community has had a long time to be able to adjust to how to fit in within a white man's society, or to fit in within a society that doesn't benefit them. Whereas now that all of this has come up, and there will be lots of people thinking about race and hierarchy and this systemized structure for the first time, and capitalism and the way that education needs to be reformed, all of this stuff, as well as race. They've got to go through this incredible. So I guess my message is to encourage people to get on board with the uncomfort and the learning process.
Learning.
It's not a history that is about you, but it's really important to learn about. And I found it personally a really enriching experience. And you guys are some of my best friends, as you know. So I anything that I get from you guys, I find really valuable. But it's not. I think that it's hard to explain, but I think that's the thing to go through, because the things we're taught at school as white people, or as the British Empire, you can kind of assimilate with straight away, because you're like, this is our guys. We did this. We dominated the world. Like it's something to be proud of, right? But then when you hear the other side of the argument, which is like, you raped, you pillaged, you killed our families, you took away our dads, you flogged our sons and daughters, you degraded us for centuries. This is like you're like, okay, like you're like, okay, there's this belief, like, did I do this? Is this my fault? Even though I didn't take part in this, was I, so it's you have to just go through that, I think, but you come out the other side, and there's a joy and there's a learning process. And I think that education, I think, is really important for people. That process is really important for people to go through.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think I'm sure there's lots of people. There's lots of people in all sorts of communities and races who are uneducated about. We're all uneducated in some way, aren't we? But we've got to balance something out a little bit.
I think you summarised it beautifully with that. I think if anybody's watching and they're reluctant or they just dismiss it. It really, if we really want to build a cohesive society, we need to have an understanding of each other. And that requires us to go back beyond the dynamics of the relationships of people that we may see, know, hear about, or interact with online. It's about getting an idea of their perspective so that your views can be informed. Yeah, informed by things that you now know rather than something that somebody's told you. And I think that builds a stronger community. It builds a stronger person. And it definitely builds more unity amongst us. And I can understand the apprehension, because it's not easy to change or come across information that contradicts what you've been brought up to believe about your
unlearning. We call it unlearning.
Yeah, and the unlearning process, like in the Matrix, taking that pill and just being pulled out of this dimension of life that you thought was the way, and seeing that there is a lot of trauma caused and a lot of pain and anger and hatred can be quite traumatizing to a person. And I can understand why someone wouldn't necessarily want to go through that experience, because in my bubble I feel safe and everything's lovely. But the problem with that is that your ignorance can sometimes be used against you, because there will be things that you contribute to unknowingly that is making things worse. And I think that if we really mean what we say about how we see people and everyone's important, I think understanding people's history and their background should equally be as important. I think what I would also want to be understood is that everybody in this country who has gone through the educational system at some stage has come across information relating to Western culture. Yeah, so whether we're looking at the royal dynasty, you learn about Henry VIII, or whether you go through and you're looking at prime ministers and Winston Churchill and all of that, we've all been educated on the road to greatness for the British Empire or the United States and all of those things. So it is less likely that anyone that you interact with that's outside of your culture would be ignorant of the history that you have. And that puts them on some levels in a more powerful position than you, because their views are genuinely informed, whereas yours may be more perception rather than what is actually taken place. And I'd encourage you to take the time to say, okay, that's fine, I'll start to research. And it's not to demonize you. Like, look, this is not about demonizing white people. Like, we need to do away with that idea. Yeah, Black Lives Matter doesn't mean white lives don't matter. Let's do away with that idea. It's in order for all lives to matter, Black lives must matter as well.
That's right.
And in order for that to be the case, there must be an interest in all lives, including Black lives. So if I'm interested in you, where you come from, what you've been through should be a part of that interest. So that I don't make decisions that negatively affect you, even in my ignorance. And I think that there is a collective responsibility that we all have to contribute to the resolution of the problems that we're facing. Because each and every one of us is important. Black, white, Asian, South Asian and North Asian, because we say Asian and that sums up a global region. There are different dynamics of Asian.
It's the biggest continent, I mean.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's about understanding that we all have a part to play. And everyone is loved. I loved everyone. I love my white brothers. I love my Black brothers. I love my Asian brothers, South and North. Yeah, I love everyone. Yeah, we are all part of one family. We are a part of the human race. Yeah, and it is our similarities that unite us, not our differences. Our differences are a part of our individual uniqueness. Our similarities,
a richness, right? Like, this is the thing is that I've discovered through my time living alongside you guys, is that it's a shame in a way I'm not there anymore, but I do miss that a lot. And I realize now that I'm not there, the things that I miss, the richness that you get from being around different sounds, different musics, different foods, right? Different, and I think, again, if you allow these things to enrich you rather than threaten you, you know, when you walk into a room and there's a bunch of Jamaican guys that are eating food that you've never seen before, like, allow that to be something that you go like, this is exciting, right? It's food I never tried, right? Might be a bit spicy for me at first, right? I never knew what Scotch bonnet was, right?
It was a hat, right?
It's a good job I like spicy food anyway, eh? But, you know, allow it to enrich you, you know, and I think that's the thing that I would say that's one of the biggest things that I've got from being a part of, in some small way, or hanging around the Black community in you guys and others, is that it's a very accepting community. It knows very well how to accept outsiders from all different race, colors, and creeds, right? So, and particularly even if you just look at Jamaicans, like or people from the West Indies, like they're a culture of people, I believe, who are very inclusive, and I find that lovely. Like, and it can be a very non-threatening experience for people who've never been in that environment before. So, you know, again, for anyone listening, like, surround yourself with this stuff, and rather than be threatened by it, allow it to enrich you and to enjoy it. Enjoy the different languages and the different foods and the different musics, like that, because you haven't got to go far before you see how far-reaching Black music is, Black history, Black figures throughout history, again, whether they've been reported or told about or not, like, they've made a massive difference. You know, so I think it's a case of allowing yourself to enjoy it rather than be threatened by it. And once you get over that barrier, I found it's the most enriching experience.
Agreed. Black history is world history. White history is world history. Asian history is world history. Yeah. And sometimes we can only focus on a portion of world history. Let's become true historians and learn about each other, and have that interest, and don't start from a point in which we engaged. Start from the point from before we even met one another, to understand how meeting one another has affected each other. I think that's important.
It's fascinating. I wanted to ask if you two had any. Oh, sorry, Sam. Go on.
No. I was agreeing with you.
Okay, cool. Like, because I would be not all right with it if you do that. It's like, terminate the call. I wanted to ask you two if you had any resources, if you read any books, watched any films, any documentaries. Where would you encourage people to turn to learn a little bit more? Again, you know, you mentioning, Khareem, obviously, about the wider issue at whole, about societies in general. Is there anything that you would encourage people to look up or watch that you found really informative?
Wow. Well, I mean, you know, my kind of research is kind of deep, so some people might find it boring, you know. So, you know, but you know,
I don't think I'll be able to post all the links to everything that you would be able to tell us.
But there's so many interesting strands to this thing, you know. It depends on where your interest lies, you know, whether you're into the fascination of things of Egypt, or you're looking into things of the origins of racism with Blumenbach, or, you know, whether you want to look at civilizations. It really, there's so much, you know.
What's a book on humanity in general that you've just any top 5 book that you found has impacted you?
I think a great book for people to read is Stolen Legacy. Stolen Legacy by George James is a really good insight into, because Western culture upholds and loves everything Greek and Roman, but don't understand where Greek and Roman got that from. And so I think that would be a really good starting point for people, since, you know, like I say, everything Greek and Roman is actually still today so important in parts of Western culture. So Stolen Legacy by George James is an excellent book for everyone to read, and I think that will give them good insight into the origins of a lot of things. Yeah.
Brilliant. How about you, Sam?
I would concur with that book. Do you know what's a good book, especially as Brits? Natives by Akala. I really enjoyed that book. Really, 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 really good book. And I think when I was younger, my parents made me watch Roots. Yeah, I'm And I know that's hard-bodied, it's hardcore, yeah. But Roots, it was a series that was shown on TV, yeah. And it basically documents black
Have you seen it,
civilization.
Mark?
I've seen some of the original, but then they did a remake as well, didn't they?
Yeah. Yeah, the remake was okay. The original, for me, but maybe it's because of nostalgia.
Remakes okay. You haven't seen the original, innit, Sam? I think.
Yeah. It's not the same. The originals were hard hitting.
Yeah.
Like, hard hitting and
great acting too.
Real eye opening and really removes any comfort that you may want to have watching a show is removed, and it just depicts the real grit of a people's experience. I think that's a good show if you're, because with me, I'm a visual learner. I like learning visually. Visually and audibly are my two main choices of learning. But I did like the Roots series. So yeah, for me, it would be to start your journey, because obviously I couldn't give you the whole an extensive list, but to definitely start the journey, I would look for Roots, and I would definitely get a Carla's book.
Natives, you said, right?
Yeah. Wait, let me get the full title. Because it's actually
I'll put a link down as well for these.
I promise you, it's a book that you will not regret reading. Natives, Race and Class in the Ruins of Empire. It's called Natives.
Okay, I'll look for that one.
By a Carla. Really, really, really good book. And maybe it's because he's our generation, you, Mark, you and I. Yeah. Sorry, Khareem. But
we taught a Carla. It's okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, true. But, he was born in the 80s, and he documents the experiences that he's learned growing up, whilst underpinning it with historical facts that have contributed to the state of society in the ruins of empire. It's a fantastic book, and one that is a great it will give. I promise you, the reader you will not be disappointed. I'm so confident. I will say to the listeners, if you buy that book and you're disappointed, let me know and I'll refund your money. That's how confident I am in the book. Honestly, it's a fantastic book. Absolutely fantastic.
Watch my podcast go viral now, you know.
Yeah.
Like 3.4 million views.
I want my money back. Sorry, guys, I have to file for bankruptcy. I've had too many requests. No, it's a fantastic book. I'm very confident in it. It's a very good book.
I think that kind of history, certainly through reputable sources like that, is a good place. I mean, I must admit, I've not read either of those books, but for me, it appeals to me to read something like that, because there's so much information flying about. And I'm sure this must be quite difficult for you, Khareem, like in your studies, because I know there's so many places that you go to find information, and there's so much that you studied. You must have to really separate the wheat from the chaff when it comes to reliable information. So there's so much rubbish out there and so much miseducation. You have to find the good stuff, right? Because a lot of the stuff you think you're reading facts, right? But you're actually reading opinion. So it's nice to get hold of a book where there's something well researched.
Yeah, that's important actually. And I think from a point of view of a black person, who, if you're growing up with misinformation or no information, and then you're looking for something to give you that spark, there's a temptation that anything you read that sounds good, to believe it. Yeah. Without being empirical about the research. You see? So what you get is a lot of people who say that the historians or they're teaching this or that, but they're just spewing out things that sound good and sound bites, but are not necessarily based in fact. Oh, we did this, we did that, we are this, we are that. Okay, show me evidence. You know, so there's no point me as a historian going to find the information that it's not backed up by anything, or it's not evidential, just so I can feel good or make others feel good about themselves. It's just, so we got to be very careful, like you're saying, in terms of referencing stuff. Making sure that
I think as well. I mean, Khareem, again, you'll know much more than me, but in the little bit of research that I've done, it's sometimes really hard to find particularly like reputable sources for certain elements of Black history because, again, it's a very oppressed part of society and often mal-educated part of society that a lot of these people can't read and write. So it's like a folk tradition and it becomes Chinese whispers, so then it like when you're trying to find certain things or find out about the history, you're relying on either what a white guy's told you about what happened in that colony or in that part of history, or you're relying on someone who was able to get out of that system and educate themselves to be able to read and write.
The good thing about some of history, man, is that there's plenty of reference material around. Because what you're basically doing is looking at pre-slavery days source of information in where there was no prejudicial element in the research. So in other words, I have no interest or no design in making other people look bad. I'm just reporting history.
Yes.
So if I'm looking at a Roman historian like Tacitus or Pliny or anyone like that, they're just reporting history.
Interesting.
There's not a slant on it thinking I'm going to show Black people bad or in a bad way. So rather than looking at modern historians interpreting ancient historians, I look at the ancient historians and go straight to the source.
Go straight to the source. Okay, good. This is good to know. Like this is for me, this is really useful information because it makes me think like that's got to be super important, right? Okay, so that's good that we've got some places that we can go to and resources that we can share. I think I'm going to end it there. We've been like over 2 hours.
Yeah,
probably just scratch the surface of where we could go with all this stuff, especially since you introduced the idea, Khareem, that the whole system needs reform. Like, regardless of any.
Start big, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's straight in from the jugular with that one.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, guys, for agreeing to be a part of this.
Honestly, appreciate it.
Pleasure.
I hope that the education continues and the joy of sharing in each other's stories continues, and I think it makes us a much more tolerant and enjoyable society to be a part of when we can learn about each other's stories, read each other's histories, and elevate each other together. So I hope that this, for anyone listening, apologies it's been so long, but it lasted so long, this podcast, but I hope you got something from it, and you've got some places to turn in terms of resources and things that you can read and videos that you can watch. I'll try and put links below for everything that we've discussed. And again, you guys, just thank you so much for being a part of this, and we'll have to do another one soon.
Cool.
Thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right,
Sam. Take care, bro.
Yeah,
Mark,
take care, guys.
all the best, bro.
All right, take care, guys. Thanks.
Take care, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Take care.
Bye-bye.